And welcome to VirtuEL 2020. It is an absolute pleasure to be back here again for the second year presenting for this fabulous conference, and shout outs to Carol Salva and Tan Nguyen for putting this together for the fourth year. So thank you so much for inviting me back. My name is Beth Skelton, and I am a presenter, coach, and consultant working with English language learners all over the world. It is my passion to elevate their educational experience. I'm going to be sharing with you today a strategy called question formulation technique. I'd like to share my screen and my slides with you now and get you right into this technique. In this session, we're going to be learning the what, why, and how of the question formulation technique. Everything that I am about to share with you can be found and more in this fabulous book called Make Just One Change. And that is the book that describes all of the steps that you need. And I'm just trying to play so you don't see everything that is on my screen. So this book, Make Just One Change, step-by-step guidance in how to do the question formulation technique. And the fabulous folks that created this have made it a Creative Commons, so it's available to everyone for free at writequestion.org. Writequestion.org has also been fast and furious at work creating tools and strategies for you to use this technique in remote learning, and that is writequestion.org, remote learning resources. Please tag them. If you are tweeting along today, please tag at WriteQuestion, hashtag QFT. You can also tag me on it, EA Skelton. I have worked with the folks at Question Formulation Technique at writequestion.org to help with strategies for language learners with the QFT. And there's an article on their blog that I am one of the quoted authors on. So with that in mind, let's just jump into a quick overview of this technique. In question formulation technique, students learn how to produce their own questions, how to improve their questions, how to strategize on using questions, and reflecting on how they've learned what they've learned. So there's so many different learning strategies involved, and we're going to see that as you experience it. In this session, you are actually going to have the opportunity to experience QFT, because that is truly the best way to learn it. And you're going to experience it in an online learning environment, so you can see that it is doable. And I'll be adding tweaks if you're in a synchronous or an asynchronous environment with the QFT, and how you can use it with breakout groups and all of that along the way. So just some reasons why. 3-year-olds ask parents about 26 questions an hour, but by kindergarten, 5 years old, those curiosity episodes fall to only 1 per hour. Wow. By 5th grade, way less than that. And that comes through several different folks in their research. And as Barbara Logan asks, how do children go from wanting to know everything under the sun to having so few questions? And she said, it's very simple. They learn it. QFT counteracts that learning. The question formulation technique says, let's bring back that 3-year-old curiosity. Let's bring back that excitement and enthusiasm for the world. And for language learners, the QFT builds their ability to ask questions. So just the structure of questioning, it taps into critical thinking, and it increases that for all of our learners, even newcomers. It says you are a capable learner and you have the ability to ask questions and go and find answers to questions. So that's where this is coming from. Let's jump in and experience the question formulation technique right now in this synchronous model, because we are together. You have a chat box that's being monitored, and I'm going to ask you to use it to participate in the QFT. Now you'll see in the picture, those are students in a face-to-face environment. So they're actually in a building and they're writing their questions on a poster chart. In absence of the face-to-face, you'll have lots of other options for how to do that. We're going to use the chat box right now. So step 1 of the question formulation technique is to provide the students with a focus for their questioning. And that focus is going to come from your content, your math, your science, your social studies, your kindergarten. At the end of this presentation, I will provide you examples from lots of areas so you have an idea of what question focuses could be. For our purposes as adults in the room and teachers, your question focus is from Warren Berger's book, A More Beautiful Question. And it's a quote saying, questioning isn't taught in most schools. That's your focus. You'll be writing questions about that. But to support you and to show and model how I support my language learners, I'm going to give you a model. In a moment, I'm going to say, just type as many questions as you can about that Q focus. And here's your language learner support. You have the question words, what, where, when, why, how, down on the left side column, and across the top, possible verbs that might be next. So that's your support. Here's your question focus. Please take a moment. I'll stop talking, and please type in the chat box any questions you can about that Q focus. Go. I see the questions are coming in. That's great. And all thanks to our colleague Miriam Munneke, EAL teacher in The Hague, for this fabulous chart. She says she got it somewhere else, but we can't find the original source. So I'm giving credit to Miriam because that's where I got it. And we'll wrap up here in another about 15 seconds. Awesome. I'm sure you have a lot more questions. And with students, they can be doing this Q focus like you're doing in the chat box. If you are using Zoom breakout rooms or Google Meet breakout rooms, the kids can use like Jamboard and write their questions on a sticky note, because then you get to manipulate them. I'll show you next step. So they can be working together on the same board, generating their questions in their small groups. All right, so here are some of the questions that just came through, and we're going to go into step 2. Now we categorize these questions into, are they closed or open? To simplify the directions, the QFT folks at writequestion.org define closed question as a question that can be answered with yes, no, or one word. Okay, so that's their simplified definition of a closed question. An open-ended question, more explanation needed. You can't answer it in yes, no, or one word. So now we get to identify some of your questions that just came through, and here they are. Why isn't questioning taught? Number 1, who would teach the questions? How do we get students to ask more questions? So here's like 3 questions that came through in the chat box. And you have question 1, all you're going to do is like write 1O or 1C in the chat box. So you're categorizing 2O or 2C. 3O or 3C. That's all you're doing. You're categorizing. Okay. So go ahead and type those in your chat box right now. And know that if your kids are in a breakout with something like Jamboard, where they have sticky notes, they can just drag and drop to the O side, to the C side. That's step 2. Okay. Thank you for doing that. Step 3 is now we are going to improve those questions. And what that means is you're going to take, you're probably guessing, right? All of these are open. So 1, 2, and 3 are all O. We are going to change one of these into a closed question. And how that would work, if you take a closed question, you change it into open. We don't have any closes here as an example. And you would take one open question and change it into closed. So if you choose one of these and you change it into closed, the kids would do this too in their breakout group with the directions. You have taught it as a maybe day 1, you just have them generate questions. Day 2, you do sort. Day 3, you're going to teach them how to now change open to closed and closed to open? Because in each type of question, you get different types of answers, and both are important. Closed questions give us information that we need to move forward. Open questions expand opportunities. Each one has a place. There's no better question or worse question. It depends on what kind of information you want. And I'll tell you what, if you would change here, why should questioning be taught, to should questioning be taught, we may want to answer the should first. We may want to look for the information on why, should it? Is there enough information to make it worthwhile teaching it? Then we go into maybe the why. So those are questions. We've got a question on the board. I just want to go ahead and interrupt and answer that right now.
Why isn't number 2 closed?
Oh, I'm sorry. Why isn't number 2 closed? Who? It is. I was reading it wrong because it's backwards in my screen. Who? Because it would be like a name or a person or a content area. Sorry, my mistake. Thanks. Good catch. Who would teach the questions? Sorry about that. I was reading it backwards and moving too fast. All right, so good catch on that. Anyway, you're going to change that you're going to change one each way just to have kids practice. For language learners, it's also really powerful to understand how they can go from a yes/no type of question to a more open question, because that will also help them with their dialogue and getting more comprehensible input depending on what their needs are. So awesome. And questioning is a really tricky challenge for English language learners because of the do and did, and then things like might and could. All of those kind of question words are really, really tricky, and this helps them develop that language. Step 4, we prioritize those questions. So in about 3 to 5 minutes, again, depending on how long you have your kids and how much practice they have with generating questions, they may develop in just 3 minutes about 15 questions. So in a team of 4 kids, they can really generate a lot of questions. And then they prioritize and they think about that question focus and say, these would be my top questions. They review their whole list and they choose 3 that are the most important to answer. And you're thinking now of those questions that you see running through the chat and say, questioning isn't taught in most schools. And if you were going to prioritize, would there be any one question you really want to know? And we're going to choose 3, but if you had to type in one of those that you've seen come through, what might be a priority question? Again, I'm going to just stop and pause for a second, choosing your priority. And then I'll share one that comes through a lot. So take a moment, prioritize which one of those questions you really want to know the answer to. Yep. Somebody wanted the question grid. I can go back to that. Yes, and all of this, I'll put my slides in the resources, and there are a lot of resources at writequestion.org. This is not one of the resources on writequestion.org yet, as far as I know, but is fabulous. All right, so now we've prioritized. Mari, was there one that came through? I've got my assistant here helping out. The great one that came through. Why should questioning be taught in school? Yay, because that's where we're going. All right, so we're going to actually answer that one. You'll have the kids reflect on why they chose those 3 priority questions. They can tell you what their answers are before you ever dive into data or information and content. Then the last step is you choose your next step with your questions. For you, I would ask, how could you use the priority questions that you've just developed in the chat during this experience to do action research in your classes? How could you say, are my own students asking real questions about content in my class? Are they showing curiosity episodes, as it's called? And what would you need to do to answer your questions? Could you have somebody chart the questions kids ask? Could you keep tabs on what questions are coming in your virtual environment about content, not just how do I find? So that would be really interesting action research in both a virtual or a face-to-face environment. And now to answer your questions, we're going to get there. The next step with student questions, there are so many things you can do. At the upper grades, it could be the prep for a Socratic seminar. So this could be their prompt for getting ready for a Socratic seminar. They might do it as a journal prompt, like you give them back their questions and they journal on what they're currently thinking about it. It might be their exit ticket at the end of the day. They might use it as a research starter. Maybe you're going to invite a guest speaker in to answer one of the questions, or as a debate prep. Lots and lots and lots of options of what you do with all those student questions that you've charted and posted, either in your virtual or live class. But sometimes you do nothing. Sometimes it's just the generation of the questions that is the learning in itself. And so there's no right or wrong on how do you use all these questions that they've generated, because the first time you do it with kids, it might take 30 to 45 minutes to go through each step. And in a virtual environment, you might do it over the course of 5 days and go through those key steps over the course of a week. So this reflection on QFT is, what did we learn through doing the QFT? How did you learn it just by generating questions? And what do you understand differently now? You would actually ask these to the kids and you're going to see some kid answers. These all come from that same text I showed you, Make Just One Change, to teach students to ask their own questions. This is the steps that we just did. It's basically 5 steps in a reflection. We did not follow these rules that are on here. This information is all on the rightquestion.org and in my resources. But when you produce your own questions, if the kids are in the same group, they need some rules about asking as many as they can. Don't stop and judge and discuss. We didn't need those rules because we were in a chat box. And so you couldn't really stop and discuss them. And then there's the how do you improve your questions, closed to open, and prioritizing. So we went through all of these steps. That was it. And now I'd like to share with you the why. Why do we teach kids to ask questions? Because of the thinking. They learn divergent thinking, lots and lots and lots of questions. They learn convergent thinking, choosing the priority questions, changing closed to open and open to closed. And they learn a lot of metacognition, metacognitive thinking around why, how did I learn that? What kind of question is it? Lots of metacognition going on as well. So there's a lot of art, there's a lot of science in the QFT. I absolutely love this strategy. Let's jump in now and see how and why it works so great in all the levels and content areas. Here's your kinder example. Take a moment to look at this lovely picture of our alligators on another alligator. There's some little ones on top of a head. This was a kinder question focus. Look at the questions these adorable kinders ask. Is the alligator camouflaged? Well, what do we know right away about this kindergartner? They've got some academic language. Why do the babies have stripes? They're looking very, very closely and seeing there's a difference between the little ones and the big ones. Where are they going? Are those baby crocodiles? Is it a mom or dad crocodile? Like, who are they on? What is the green stuff? They're looking at the lake. Why are they in the water? Why are the baby alligators' eyes white and the moms are black? Wow, close looking. Why are the baby alligators on top of the mama alligator? And why does the mama or daddy have bumps on them? This gets us into so much research. Can you imagine now reading a text about the baby alligators or a text about this animal? I mean, fabulous. So these were kinder questions, obviously done orally, and the teacher is charting as the kids are asking the questions. Building in a think, pair, share. In a virtual environment, this is going to be synchronous activity. If that is asynchronous for kinder, you can have them either Flipgrid the questions. We learned from Justin this morning about using Flipgrid for formative assessment. So if you want to go back to his session, Justin Garcia did a whole thing on Flipgrid. But anyway, you can have them Flipgrid their responses orally in kinder instead of typing them. Here's one for a math 4th grade example, which I absolutely love. So this was the teacher introducing variables. How about that? All she did was post that on the board. And then the students came in and they wrote these questions. Check it out. Why is the 24 first? Notice the 24 is equal to all of these other things, and they're used to seeing it the other way around. But how about question number 8? Do the numbers have to be the same? Because the smiley faces are the same. My gosh, they just figured out variables. Do the 3 faces mean something? Again, they're figuring out variables. How about question 11? Can we replace each smiley face with an 8? Woo, woo. This kid has just figured out variables in 4th grade. Got it, right? Done. And they did it all through questioning. I'm just so excited about all of this. So let's take science. Maybe 9th grade physics, and we have a little picture motion on an incline. That's it. That's the focus. And then you get questions like this. How steep is the incline? How would the angle of the incline affect the motion of the cart? What? They ask about initial velocity. They ask about friction. They ask about momentum. They are figuring out physics and the questions we have to answer, all from the question formulation technique from the beginning. The teacher can start to sort these. They can figure out the background knowledge of the students, all from the questions. This is a fabulous way to start your lessons. Initial beginning language learners, they can write in Spanish. They can write in their home language. It doesn't matter because the thinking is there and they're showing that they can think. We can get that translated so that the whole class can benefit from their questioning as well. How about a humanities example? We're going to use a cartoon that is a primary source cartoon from the time frame, and then throw it out there. What kind of questions are students going to ask about this cartoon on the Southern Chivalry argument? Clubs? Question mark. Why are they fighting? Are they even fighting? So isn't that interesting how the closed question might give us better answer than the open in this situation? Like, is this a fight or is it not? Why are they in court? Who hit whom first? It's, again, the closed question may be more valuable in this situation around the humanities because there's so much going on in that primary source cartoon. Last one around language arts from David Pearson. He says the questions a student asks after reading a text are a better assessment than the question the student can answer about that text. And many teachers who use QFT have actually given their final assessment as you write your questions. And they don't need the answers, but the questioning itself, as you saw in those examples, gives so much information about what the students understand. It's a significant impact when we teach students to ask their own questions. And of course, no presentation would be complete without citing John Hattie, right? And he says that engaging in pre-lesson self-questioning, like the QFT does, improved students' rate of learning by nearly 50%. So even Hattie's meta research supports the QFT. Here's some reflections from students that will also encourage you to give it a try. This was from a remedial summer school student in Boston, from the folks at writequestion.org. And he said, the way it made me feel was smart because I was asking good questions and giving good answers. That'll convince you from a remedial student who finally feels smart. Hooray! And how about the 6th grader who says, just when you think you know all you need to know, you ask another question and discover how much more there is to learn. You know, one of our goals is always about creating lifelong learners. Is that the answer right there? We just created a lifelong learner. You ask another question and there's more to know. And how about this one, a high school student? When you ask the question, you feel like it's your job to get the answer. Rather than the teachers always asking, and the teachers being the one. These are the students saying, this is what I want to know. These are my questions about this topic. Here's the great news. The folks at writequestion.org, it is totally worth putting your information in and getting on their listserv. They do not plague you, promise, and it's free. They have on their site under online opportunities, the templates to do this on Padlet. So you can do it in an asynchronous environment through Padlet or through Google Forms. I would recommend that you teach students each of the steps in a synchronous environment in your breakout room, or as a whole class, and do it with the chat box like we did. And then you can follow up with your asynchronous QFT for your units. They also have videos of teachers that have been doing this synchronously and asynchronously all spring. And they've got webinars on it. They have done such great work on making sure that you can use QFT remotely. And I just wanted to share it with my EL community because I'm so passionate about this for language learners as well as all learners because of the language that's embedded when you ask questions. You can join the educators. There are close to 500,000 about educators right now that are using QFT. They have everything you need with templates and lesson planning and classroom examples. Everything I pulled for you on classroom examples, from the alligator all the way down, you know, to the history example, that's all from writequestion.org. There's more for every content area there with the examples for you. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to answer some questions now. I have a couple of minutes left. And I'm getting my assistant here to show me what's coming in the chat box. And let's see, the questions are, I'm wondering if adding specialized tier 2 vocabulary as a word bank would help students embed new vocabulary. Absolutely. This is another fabulous support, is go ahead and add that word bank. Where do they get the vocabulary for asking the questions? Like the student that said camouflaged, that was in their vocabulary probably, but the teacher knew this kid has a lot of vocab going on. You could provide some vocab in the beginning, or the kid might like, how come I can't really see the little babies? Well, you know they want that word camouflage, but they don't have it yet. Should the vocabulary keywords be introduced before the QFT? Great question. I would say it depends. I had generally done it without, to see what they've got and how are they able to work around getting their question out. If you're working with newcomers, they need some vocab to be able to ask the question, plus the question chart. If you've got kind of level 2+ and they've got some words, it's a great formative assessment. What words do they already own? Then you can build the vocabulary and do a QFT at the end of the unit. And now you've got a pre and a post. What kind of questions are they asking? Could we have examples of question stems for students to use while they're practicing? Absolutely. So I like the chart because it's more open than just a stem. But if you would like to present a stem like why did blank, how do blank, you can do that. And it really supports language learners. There's a blog on the writequestion.org that I'm a like they've interviewed me for it. I didn't write it. And there are 3 language teachers. 2 of them are foreign language teachers and they're using QFT. So they have beginners. And they talk about on that all of the different kinds of strategies, from vocab banks to sentence frames or question frames to support. If we scaffold questions move from yes to no to either or, and then to open-ended, it would support all students. Possibly. I think having them be able to ask any kind of question and then sort is a real important part of it. However, when I first started teaching questions with beginners, like low-level language learners, I did teach how to just ask a yes, no. And then we developed all kinds of yes, no questions. And then the next day we went into open-ended and asking the why do, why did, how do, how did, might, and then expanded it out from there. So there's some other ideas. I'm getting another question coming in. The average time you'd front load this before using the technique as a teaching tool. So when I've done this with my students, day 1 is just how to ask questions. Because many of the kids don't actually know how to ask, like the actual structure of a question, it takes a while. Day 2, we took all those questions that they generated with support in class, we sorted. So you get the idea. Day 3, we took those sorts of open, closed, and changed them and played with them. So it might take a week to introduce all of the steps. And it might take, depending on your student's language acquisition level, longer or shorter to actually go through the process. How can we be more creative with asking questions for students on a chat and promote social emotional support for English language learners? So I actually prefer doing the QFT in breakout, giving a little support with the kids before they go into breakout, and then providing either on a Google Doc, in your Padlet, on the Google form itself, all of the language supports they need. So that chart from Merriam-Webster or the sentence frames and the word bank, and then letting them in their small group breakout talk and work with each other. They provide that support in their small group breakout. I can see what they're doing because I have access to all of their Google Docs as they're working in their various breakout groups. And then I can pop in to any group that I notice is struggling or not producing a lot of questions. And then I just pop in and go, hey guys, do you need some support with asking questions? So I would recommend that most of the QFT work is done in a breakout, not in a chat. But because we don't have breakouts today, live streaming to YouTube, I just did it through the chat. So hopefully that helps with that. And the last one, because our time is up, why do we ask students where their priority questions? Oh, that's great. So that question about why do you say, where did your priority question fall? Was it question 1? Was it question 12? Was it question, what question number was it? Is because they have to realize that the more questions you ask, the better your questions are. And maybe it takes 6, 7, 8 questions as a team to really get into the depth or the meaning, the meat of what you want to ask. And the majority of time, the best questions are usually, they're question 12, they're question 15. So it's really interesting to ask them, what number question was it for your priority? Thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed experiencing this QFT. Please stay in touch with me. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to work with you and you know, seeing your questions come through and sharing QFT, something I'm really, really passionate about, and thrilled that it is possible to do in a synchronous or asynchronous, and of course, a face-to-face environment, wherever we may be in the coming months. Thank you so much. I look forward to staying in touch with you. Tweet at me or send me chats. We're going to stay on and check out the YouTube for a little bit longer. Take care. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.